Hey everyone, welcome to this video where I'm going to be showing you the third game that I recently played in Over the Board tournament. I've already done recaps of the first two games, so you can check that out. The link to the playlist will be in the description. And if you're just interested in the chess, you can go to this timestamp over here, and that should jump straight in with the brilliant chess, of course. If you are here for the journey and the experience and hearing about Over the Board chess though, then let's jump into it. We have now reached round 3. If you've seen the previous two videos, things are going pretty well so far. I will say as well, this game was a little bit different to how the previous two games are, but I won't spoil yet how it was different. What happened was so the previous round, as you saw, it was quite a long game in terms of moves, and also we got into time trouble, so I think we were the last game that was going on. So there was about a 15-minute break between the two rounds. We were doing accelerated rounds because it was a small tournament, it was COVID regulations as well, so trying to have people done as quickly as possible is the way that it works. So I hadn't had a huge break. It was now like 2:30 in the afternoon. I hadn't eaten lunch yet, but I did have time to have a quick snack beforehand and try phone my accommodation because I hadn't checked in yet. I was planning on checking in between rounds and I obviously didn't have enough time to do that. So still a little bit stressful, but I was otherwise feeling good. I'd had two really good games. I was keeping my energy levels up with electrolytes and sugar and things like that. And I wasn't falling asleep at the board yet, although I really, really was hoping that I would get a buy at some stage so I could have an early night or maybe have an afternoon nap. But the buy did not seem to be appearing. On the plus side though, I was on 2 out of 2 and there was only one other player left in the tournament who had 2 out of 2, and that is of course the person who I played against over here. So everything is set for a really epic matchup. I'm ready. I'm keen to get the wins that I can be sole leader of the tournament because, I mean, why not aim for the stars? We might as well go for a magnificent win. And there's some juicy rating points on the line. We're very evenly matched, but I know it's a tough opponent as well, so I'm not going into the game overconfident or just expecting to win. I did have realistic expectations. Another advantage over here is that I have the white pieces for the game. So, of course, I start off with e4. My opponent plays c5. This is all pretty quick. Knight f3, d6, d4, takes. I'm like, okay, it's Sicilian, it's gonna get into theory, this is not ideal. My opponent plays knight to f6. And so there were two things going on at this point in my mind. Number one was I had somehow managed, we were playing in a separate venue, and I had somehow managed in the previous two rounds to sit on the correct side of the table. And you're gonna be like, Rebecca, what is the correct side of the table? So the tables were, first of all, they were pretty high, which is a whole nother different thing because I had to, in the previous round, sit on the edge of my chair so I could see the entire board. Also, I felt like I was a 5-year-old sitting down at a table and I could barely see the board. But so the tables were quite high in the first place. But what I didn't realize was on one side, the thing that goes down on the table was really, really long. And I have fairly long legs, right? Well, I'm pretty sure everyone in the tournament, no matter how long your legs were having the same issue. But on the one side of the table where the board went down further, if you just sat on your chair and tried to put your knees flat, you bumped into the table. So I was trying to get comfortable. I was swiveling in my chair, trying to cross my legs this way, trying to cross my legs the other way, banging into the chair. I was so uncomfortable, being what is happening here? I was like, how have my poor opponents been coping with this in the previous rounds? It had just been coincidence that I'd sat on the side of the table where the edge is higher, where you could just sit like a normal human being without bumping your legs. So I was slightly distracted by that. We shall put that out there. This does have relevance to the chess as well. I'm getting there. And then the second thing was, I was like, oh my goodness, it's been so long since I played over the board chess. And I know I vaguely know my Sicilian theory if I know what the name of the opening is. So what I usually do, if you watch my streams, you will see often I'll be like, oh, this is the Najdorf, right? And then I look across, and even now I'm seeing on chess.com, it's saying Sicilian defense open variation. I look across at that because it shows up in the game chat on chess.com, and I'm like, oh, it's the Najdorf, I'm doing this. Oh, it's the Rouser, this is my plan. Oh, it's the Khan, and I messed up my theory already, but oh well. So that's what I usually do. So I was thinking in my mind, I was like, it'd be so cool if I could just be oh yeah, this is a Najdorf, then I know what to play. And I was like, but you can't because it's over the board chess. I need to know my theory more. And I was like, Rebecca, just have faith in yourself. It's the Najdorf. They played d6. Obviously it's a Najdorf. I'm like, and I play bishop g5. And I'm like, he might have prepped against this, but it's fine. We're just gonna have faith. We learn. We do things wrong, we learn. So I go bishop to g5. And if you aren't facepalming already, then thank you for missing things like I have. But yeah, very important thing. Apart from the fact that this isn't even the Najdorf, a very important thing is to go knight to c3 to defend your e-pawn, which is being attacked. And this is why it's important sometimes to not get caught up in theory and to rather just go for playing chess moves that make sense. that are backed in like what you're supposed to be doing. So yeah, that was not ideal. Bishop to g5, and my opponent went into a long thing, so I managed to get like quite a nice time advantage at least. But a 5-minute time advantage in a 60-minute game is not the advantage that you would hope it would be. And then my opponent decided to take on e4 afterwards. He said after the game, he was like, he knew that I played the bishop g5, and so he felt a bit bad because he realized I'd like messed up the moves or something like that. But yeah, so at this point I'm like, well, can I just resign already? Because it is move 5. I've blended a pawn with 0 compensation against someone who knows how to play chess. Everyone in the tournament knows how to play chess, but it's not like this is a like a noob beginner who I can be like, okay, I've blended a pawn, but I'll win back your queen in 10 moves time. And it's a really long game, so it's not even as though I can flag my opponent or swindle my opponent. I was like really tilted over here, but I'd had some time to reflect and think in the 5 minutes that my opponent had been taking to make the move. I might be exaggerating a bit, but he did take quite a long think before he took the pawn. And I just had a long think, regretting my life choices, being like, Rebecca, why? Why did this happen? So I had time to then blitz out my move to be like, it was planned. It was all a plan. This is clearly theory, but I was very not happy on the inside. So I just went back. I was like, well, it is what it is. Things have happened. This is not ideal. So then he played a6. So I was like, let me just develop my bishop and attack the knight. And I was expecting potentially like knight here. Maybe even just like being aggressive. I don't even know. I was really in a funk over here. I was not happy with my life. And my friend then went back to f6 with their knight. So that made me a little bit happier because I did think, for some reason, I thought they were going to go back to c5, and then I was like, then I might have to trade, and I'm already down a piece, and my king is unhappy, and everything's unhappy. So they went back to knight f6, and I was like, yay, and then I was like, well, this still sucks for me. Because I'm like, they have 2 pawns in the center. I can't even highlight how many pawns I have in the center, because I don't have any pawns in the center. So I just went knight to d2, which is also a really strange looking move, but I was like, if I go to c3, then I can't like push c3 in future. I was like, maybe I can defend this. I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't. So I went knight to d2, just trying to make the best of bad situation, because I was expecting pawn pushes as well. I was like, it would maybe be nice to have a c3 in. I think if this pawn was pushed, I was planning on going knight to f5. But yeah, I was also worried, I think, about d5. So I thought if I put a knight on c3, then after like e5, let me show you that. If I go knight over here, then after e5, if I go like, well, I can't even go back here because that might be a move. But let's say I go back here, then this is potentially possible. I don't know. Oh, it's not. As I say, it's in a bad place. Knight takes e5. Oh, knight takes e5 here. Oh, okay. So there are some tactics. Of course, I wasn't thinking this far ahead, which I probably should have been, but I was just scared. I was like, it's 2 pawns in the center. Those are some really, really strong pawns. I don't really like my knight over here. So that's why I decided to go to d2. My opponent developed the knight to c6, and I thought, let me just go c3. So I'm opening up this diagonal for my queen. I'm defending here, so I can maybe take back, and then I have 1 pawn in the center compared to 0, which is an improvement, at least. And then also maybe my bishop can go back in future. I'm still trying to do my best attempt. g6, and I was like, this is now the 3rd game in a row where someone's fianchettoed. But it makes a lot of sense over here, especially with I've got the bishop pointing that direction, so might as well just blunt it, go bishop g6, keep your king very safe, and it's quite a nice setup. So I castled, just following the opening principles after abandoning them right at the start and plundering pieces. So bishop to g7, I went h3 just to potentially, I don't know if knight to g4 was something that I should be worried about, but I'm also not entirely sure what else I can be doing over here. So I was thinking rook e1, I was like, it's not really pointing at anything necessarily. And I didn't really like this situation, because then I was like, if I take back and I've gone rook e1, then I don't have a rook on the f file. So I thought, let me go h3, then the bishop and the knight can't go over there, and also I can't get back mated. You gotta hang on to the little hopes in life. So my opponent ended up castling. I then put a knight on f3, thinking, well, I did check that there weren't going to be any forking possibilities over here. I think I checked that. And I was also thinking maybe at some stage I could maybe go get a knight on g5. I could maybe go after f7 square. If they overextend these pawns, I can maybe go like bishop c4 or bishop back and then along here, or queen across and attack the pawn. Something like that. So I thought, let's go knight f3. It's just getting a knight to a little bit more of an active square. And then if they take back here, probably still taking here to get a pawn in the center, but I have extra options. And it's always good to have options. Except when you're terrible at making decisions. Then it's best to have zero or one option. After that, e5 happened, and I have to take over here because if I move my knight away, so let's say I go over here, then unfortunately this is a move. So I have to take intermediate move. My opponent took back, and now I went bishop to c2 just to make sure that I was no longer in this pin. But you can see this is just, it's a really, really unpleasant situation. It's a horrible pawn to have blundered at the start because you've already, I already gave up one of my central pawns, so the d pawn, I gave that up for the c pawn. And then to blunder my other central pawn, you can see these pawns are really, really strong. And unfortunately, I was forced in that situation after e5 happened. I was forced then to take on c6 and to give them another pawn moving towards the center. So it was just really tricky to come up with like any ideas or counterplay in this game. And I did go back and forth quite a bit. I was like, you know what? I could just resign this game. And then I could go check into my accommodation because that was also stressing me out a little bit. I was like, I need to like go and get my key at some stage. I can't just rock up at 9 o'clock at night. I told them I'd be there at about 2 o'clock and it's now 4 o'clock. So that was stressing me out a little bit, and I was like, maybe I could just go and I could take a nap. I'd been awake for a lot of hours. I'm not used to getting up at 6 a.m. And then traveling and then playing 2 games of chess. So I thought maybe I'll just resign. But then the other part of me was like, I came here to play chess. I have to play chess. I can't just resign when it's not over. Like I have to get to a situation where it's properly over, and then I can resign and conserve energy and go for my nap and all of these things. And I was also thinking I'll feel really stupid if I resign this game and then I get a buy in the next game. And then I like cut this game short for no reason. And then have the round this evening off. And what am I gonna do? Like I didn't even take a laptop, so I had no way to entertain myself while I was at my accommodation. So I was like, let me just keep on playing. We'll see how it goes. It'll be fine. So rook b8, busy attacking my pawn. I decided to go bishop b3 just to block this attack off, and then also to get onto this diagonal where I'm potentially attacking f7 in future. So queen c7, which is quite a nice move. It's preparing, once the bishop moves, you're now connecting the rooks. You're defending this. You're getting off of the d file, because that was another thing that I looked at very briefly. I was thinking, can I maybe go like queen across, rook across to d1, and then potentially win the e5 pawn? Because if I can just win one of those central pawns, or maybe remove like one or two of the central pawns, even if I have to exchange a pawn to do it, that makes me like my position so much better. At the moment, the issue is just that it's such a majority for black in terms of pawns in the center. So I was thinking, but then queen c7, of course, gets off of that diagonal, prepares to potentially go rook across and start pushing the pawns and getting them rolling, and my poor minor pieces are defenseless against that. So I went queen e2 now, once again thinking I can get a rook to d1 if necessary, plus I'm attacking a6 if the bishop decides to go wandering in this kind of direction. So knight to d5 happened, and I was a little bit sad about this. I was like, I don't really want to give my bishop up, because then my opponent, apart from being a pawn up, has the bishop pair as well. But I couldn't see a way to avoid this. So I can go back here, and it's just looking super passive. Plus, after knight to f4, I think I have to probably take anyway. And then I'm giving the bishop with the knight, and I'm getting an open e-file for their rooks, which they can probably use better than I can. I can't go anywhere along this diagonal, so this is not safe, this is not safe, this is not safe, this is not safe. And this also doesn't look very effective. I mean, they might be able to play h6. Like, f6, not a great idea. But they could also go knight to f4, and then I was still thinking that I have to take their knight, because their knight on f4 is going to be quite annoying. It's also attacking my queen. It's helping them if they want to attack. Just not happy with that entire situation. I was just like, okay, we're going to move our rook across, centralize our rook, attack this pawn. I decided there wasn't really anything happening with my rook on a1, but I thought if knight takes over here, instead of queen takes, I'm going to take back with the pawn so that I get the open f-file, and maybe I'll get a knight g5 in, where I have the knight and the bishop and the rook, all of them busy attacking the f7 square. Once again, you got to grip onto like every little bit of hope that you have in a chess game if you're trying to fight for a win, else you might as well resign if you're just like making random moves. So along with all of this, I did have like vague plans, and I was thinking of scenarios where I could potentially win a pawn or try turn things around or get a little bit of an attack on the king. Unfortunately, though, my opponent was playing, well, I mean, good for my opponent, but unfortunate for me, he was playing really good chess. He was just shutting down any ideas that I was having. And that's what I kind of like about over the board chess as well. You have enough time to It is. It's like a fighting of ideas. I have an idea, you try block it while implementing your own ideas, and it just goes back and forth. And it's something that you don't have quite as much in Blitz because you're not really thinking a lot about everything. And yeah, so that's just one thing. And my opponent was doing that very well over here. So after rook to d1, they did take on e3, and he looked a little bit surprised. I know you shouldn't be reading into your opponent's expressions, but like you do it. It's a really long chess game. What else are you supposed to do with your life? But he looked as though he was a little bit surprised with pawn takes on e3. So I was like, yes, slight victory. I have the element of surprise. I'm like, I'm still losing, but there's a small win over there. Because I'm thinking over here that, okay, as I said earlier, I'm opening up the F file and F7. I might be able to add some pressure over there. And then I was also thinking, now that I have a pawn in the center, so it's still like 2v1 in the center, but if I can go e4, that's maybe slowing things down a little bit. It's maybe making d5 a little bit trickier to play. If I have my bishop over here, you can't play f5 to try and challenge it while your king's still there. And if you move your king, maybe I can then do more things on f7. So this was kind of my idea, and I was feeling not too terrible over here. Also, one thing that I was keeping in mind the entire time is just to notice that the queen and the rook are on the same diagonal. So every move I was just having to check that there was no crazy thing that I was missing where there could be like an a5, a bishop across. And it's important to keep these possibilities for your opponent in mind, even if there's no way that it currently works. Sometimes a couple of moves later it ends up working out. So good to keep in mind, and I had that at the back of my mind. And I got quite disappointed when my opponent then went bishop to e6. So I was like, come on. With the bishop at e6, unfortunately, I mean, I can take, but then they have another pawn in the center, and that has been the recurring theme of the game, that my opponent has far too many pawns in the center, and I have, like, none. So I finally got one in the center. I don't want to give my opponent an extra one to, like, balance out the odds and make it even worse in my favor. So I decided not to take. The problem is as well, it's also defending f7, so I just thought, okay, bishop to a4. I was like, I'm attacking this. If they go rook across, I have the move bishop takes over, queen takes over here. And that's not too bad for me then. Sorry, I'm thinking this like a move later. So let's say they do a random move. I can go take over here. If rook goes across here, take. If queen takes, take. That's obviously bad, but I wasn't expecting them to put the rook here. But the key thing here was I was thinking, even if I drop these two pawns, I've got rid of one of the pawns in the center. Hopefully I can win another one or two of these. And also, remember, my opponent has the bishop pair, so their bishops are potentially more powerful than my knight. And if everything's on one side of the board, the bishops lose a lot of their power. So I was trying to think, even if I have to like give up an extra pawn on this side, if I can get rid of these central pawns, and maybe even this one as well, if I have a 3v2 situation and it's rooks and bishops or something left on the board, there's a chance that I can hold this and it can still be a draw. If I have 2 pawns, they have 3, and we have a couple of pieces. There's a chance if it is all on one side of the board. So that was my thoughts, and that was why I went bishop to a4. I was thinking, even if I drop this pawn in future, it's fine. I should be able to pick up these 2 pawns. But unfortunately, once again, my opponent had other plans and decided to go rook to b6, which is just defending these 2. So I went b4, which in retrospect, I am not entirely sure that was the best move, but I wasn't entirely sure what else to do. Sorry, something that I actually noticed over here, I think I was planning for this. So bishop takes a2, and then I was thinking of queen over here. This is what I calculated. I knew I calculated the rook going across here, and I was like, why would I do that? But yeah, so I was thinking, if the rook goes across here, then I can go here. So that's all fine. The dog agrees with me as well. So I went b4 with the idea that, first of all, I'm stopping potentially any advance over there. And the a4, the dog is really barking. I don't know if I should re-record and edit it out. I think we're just going to keep on going with the words of support from the dog. So I was thinking as well, the pawn can't go to a5 at the moment. And then another thing is, by moving the pawn to b4, my queen is now defending a2. So bishop takes a2 is no longer a threat. My opponent then played h6. I was like, well, now I can't even go knight to g5. I thought about knight g5 over here, but then I thought I'm just losing a pawn. So that doesn't look too great. And now after this, I was feeling even more dejected, because I'm like, literally every single hope that I have in this game is being squashed ruthlessly and mercilessly. So now I don't really have any hope of anything happening on f7, because I can't get a knight to g5. I don't have a bishop on this diagonal. There's nothing happening over there. So I was like, back to the drawing board. What can we do? So I went with my original plan of just pushing the pawn to e4, trying to potentially make it more difficult for them to push. It doesn't really make it more difficult, but it's something. And it might also keep the bishop out of the game for a little bit of time, because I do have this diagonal to my king, and I don't really want to. I don't want them to be able to take advantage of it. And here it's tricky because like queen to a7, I can just move across. You don't really have any good moves with the rook in any case. So e5, trying to at least slow down or delay an advance. My opponent then went c5, which is not something I was expecting at all, because it's a really strange looking move. Usually when you're pushing your pawns, you do like them to be supported so that you can take back towards the center. But this now makes a lot of sense, because if I take over here and you take back, my c3 pawn is now starting to get really, really weak, and it's tough for me to defend it. I also have to still worry about the a2 pawn. My bishop is misplaced. My knight is like a dream knight, of course, because it is so active. It can't go to this square, can't go to this square, can't go here. It can go there, but that's the side of the board. That's the side of the board. This is like really, really sad. And d2 is also just blocking the rook, my one active piece. So it's just a huge disaster for me at this stage. So c5, even though it's a move that looks like it's a little bit strange, it makes a lot of sense. And I decided over here that I was just going to go back. I was thinking over here that if my opponent takes, I can take back. If they take over here, I take here. And then even if I'm losing the pawn, remember what I said earlier, I was thinking that if I could get rid of some of the central pawns, even at the cost of the pawns on this side of the board, then I'm a lot happier, because my knight versus their bishop shouldn't be as much of a weakness as it sometimes is. And I should hopefully be able to hold this. I can maybe trade off this pawn for one of those pawns and just stay safe on the side and hope that I can weather out the storm. Unfortunately, once again, my opponent stopped me, so they took on b3. And I was like, maybe there's still some hope. They took over here, I took back. They took, I took. And now, unfortunately, instead of being greedy and going for this pawn, which is what I was hoping they were going to go for, my opponent decided to take this pawn over here. So I took, because I've got it. But the difference now is, if you look at this position over here, so queen or rook takes, whichever one, if you look at this compared to what happened in the actual game over here, you can see that this pawn is a lot weaker. It can be really, really easily attacked. And this pawn is now like less contested in terms of it can now move forward freely. This pawn can now be supported. It's now, instead of it being 3 versus 4 on the king side, it's my one lonely random little pawn on this side that, like, maybe if I can get it going, can do something. Versus on the other side of the board, it's 4 versus 2. So that is looking a lot scarier in terms of my endgame chances. But not much that I can do about it, unfortunately. So I went here, still hopes and dreams of something happening on f7, but the dreams are getting smaller and smaller and getting darker and darker as we go along. So the rook went back to attack the pawn. I decided to defend the pawn with the knight, which is a really passive move, but in my defense, there's not too much else to do. And I didn't want to drop this pawn. It's like, this is now my hopes and dreams for a better future. I won't spoil and say what the future ended up being. But yeah, not great. And I was thinking as well, maybe I'm controlling the e4 square in future. So if the rook moves away and you try to push this pawn, I can take that over there. My opponent then played rook to d8. So now it's busy kind of forcing my hand, because if I take, I'm then going to have to move the attacked knight or just play super passively and try to defend the knight. And if I don't take, if I move my rook away, I ended up going over here. They're still attacking my knight, which is holding together the entire fort. So not great. I went across. They now offered the queen trade. I didn't really want to trade queens, but I didn't see what other choice I had. This is now being doubly attacked. They can just take over here and then take the knight. I can move the knight over here and then just drop the pawn. It's really not great. So I thought, let me at least take over there. And then I went back and defended the knight. So yeah, defending the knight, which is defending this pawn, but it's not that difficult to attack. I was hoping for something like this, so that I could then move my knight away, maybe get my rook behind the pawn, start pushing the pawn, possibly still, remember, f7 is still slightly weak, and I do have a rook on this file, so there's a little bit of hope. I'm not in a resignable position yet, even though it's very unpleasant. After f5, though, it's starting to look even more unpleasant, because now f7 that I was previously busy attacking is no longer on f7, and it's on f5 where it's a lot more secure. And this rook is just babysitting the knight, so I can't do something like rook c6 trying to attack these. But even if I could do that, king to h7, is the thing, so I can't look at giving up the knight for a pawn or two. The bishop's doing a great job of defending all of these and also creating a little castle for the king to hide in, and I can't really get this pawn going very easily. So here I had a great idea. I was like, it's 4 versus 2. I need to try break up these pawns and try get to a situation where I have a chance of surviving and getting the draw and just holding their pawns out, maybe winning this pawn and then having like a 1v2 situation. We did the video quite recently on pawn endgames. You can go check that out. But we can notice over here that this bishop is a different color to the h1 square. So I was like, in a dream scenario, if I can trade off the rooks, if I can trade off some of the pawns, even if I have to give up this pawn for this pawn, I might be able to get to a situation where I can just sacrifice my knight for this pawn and then I get a drawn endgame with my... it's the wrong color bishop for the promotion square if my opponent is only left with an h pawn. And also if I can maybe like trade the rooks off for something and break up the pawns as well, because at the moment when they connected and it's the 4 pawns, really unpleasant for me. But if I can break them up, maybe like get this one so this one's now an isolated pawn, it could be okay for me. Unfortunately though, what I didn't see, so here I calculated, I was like, takes, and I was like, oh, well, this doesn't work, Rebecca, because they can just attack it. Then I was like, wait, I have a little bit of an idea. I can go rook to c4. Rook to c4 with the idea that if they take over here, I take here. We're all good. If anything, I probably do have a big advantage over here. If they take me over here, I can take back with the knight, so I'm saving the knight. I'm trading off one of the rooks, which makes me a lot happier. This situation is looking so much better than it did previously. It's still not looking great, but it's looking better, and we just want to like gradually improve our position and hope that our opponent blunders. So that is what I calculated when I played g4, because I did see that the pawn could be attacked. And after they took, unfortunately what I didn't see, I didn't even consider that they could go and attack the pawn with the d rook instead of the b rook. And now this doesn't work because they just take the free knight. I unfortunately don't have any checks. Every single move I was checking, I was like, is there anything I can do on this side of the board? There was just nothing. And here I have no way to defend the pawn. I can't go over here. I could lift the rook and then I'm probably trading off the rook, but then it's 3 pawns uncontested versus my sad pawn that's probably going to die quite soon. And that's just completely resignable. So I went check. I'm being slightly aggressive, and then moved the knight here thinking, okay, maybe I lose these 2 pawns. This is proper dreaming, but you gotta dream in chess. So I thought maybe I can lose these 2 pawns. I can try win this pawn, even if I have to like exchange the bishop for it. And then it's 2 pawns and 2 rooks versus 2 rooks, which is obviously completely losing, but like maybe there's a chance. Maybe I get a perpetual check. There's always a little bit of hope. My opponent took on g4. My king went across to h2, so I wanted to hang on to the 2 rooks because I was like, that's my only chance for a perpetual check or like some sort of activity against the king. So if I go here, they can just trade. And this is... wait, after this... I'm not sure about you, but this is not the sort of game that I would like to be playing on a Saturday afternoon. So I decided to go across to the other direction. The disadvantage of this, though, is now my king is just cut off for eternity. And my opponent ensured that by going pawn to h5, so now I can't even go up and attack it like this. This pawn is currently hanging at the moment. The king is really safe, even safer with h5, because now they can escape in this direction. I was looking at every single possible resource that I might have, and none of them were working out. So I went knight to d6, thinking like maybe there's a chance that they move across, like move over here, and then maybe I can win the bishop. It's probably still losing, even if this happens. But I was looking at, I think, rook over here and wondering if there was any chance that I could win the bishop. It doesn't seem like there is. But yeah, hopes and dreams that didn't come true. My opponent went across and attacked my knight instead. So I hopped back over here and I'm like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to trade. I traded off the bishop and went rook across. I saw this, but like, what can you do? I went up with my king. They checked me. I went down with my king. Unfortunately, no matter what I did, so if I went down here, they can still go up here and they're threatening checkmate, so I have to go there as well. It's getting to the same position just through a different move order. So rook d3 check. My other pawn falls. It's now 3 versus 0, but I did one last attempt. Because sometimes, like, when you've decided that you want to resign, you're like, I will try my only hope. And if it doesn't work. So I kind of decided over here, after the check, I was like, well, this sucks. I was like, now I'm going to lose my b pawn. I was like, I can try attack the e-pawn, because if I have the e-pawn, maybe I'll like play on for a little bit, but if they defend it, I'm just going to resign. And after this, I was like, I'm going to attack it, and if they go here, I resign. And sure enough, my pawn went to b4. And so I resigned. And that was the end of the game, and it was quite sad because I was really upset with this game because it was a really strong opponent, and I'd be keen to see how I did against him without blundering a pawn on move 5. That's always the thing. So I've said this before, I don't mind losing chess games so much. What I don't enjoy doing, obviously I don't enjoy losing chess games, I'm not weird like that, but I don't always get upset if I feel like I've played a really good game and maybe made like one slip up at the end, or miscalculated something, or just been outplayed by my opponent. And that's okay. That is completely fine. But something like this, if you go back to the start, just blundering a pawn on move 5, like easy blunder, a stupid blunder, and it meant that I was on the back foot for the rest of the game. That was really frustrating for me, and I was quite upset with this game. I wasn't very happy with it because of the fact that it wasn't the fact that I lost the game. It was the fact that I had lost the game on move 5 through like no fault of anyone but myself for being stupid and not taking, when I had like an hour on my clock, not taking a couple of seconds and just being like, knight attacks pawn, let me defend the pawn, as I would usually do. But I was, distracted. I was, getting used to over the board chess. And this is why I'm trying to get back to playing as well, because you do make stupid mistakes like this that as you play more and more, you don't start thinking along the lines of, it would be so nice if like in my usual playing there's just the name of the opening on the side of the board that I can just double check that I'm playing the right theory. Like, that isn't something that I've ever thought of before I started streaming and playing so much online chess and playing like no over the board chess. The stuff like that, I'm sure we'll iron out the kinks as we get through them. But yeah, quite a tilting game all in all. Thank you very much for being here through my pain though, and watching the video, making it all the way to the end. If you would like to see the previous rounds, I will link the playlist on the screen somewhere. And then I'll also, once I've posted the 4th round game, I will post that and put it as a link over here as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.